This is the African penguin. It is the only penguin found on the immense African continent. On land, it's a clumsy, feathered Charlie Chaplin with a comic and fascinating human way of moving and walking. But once underwater, they're a marvel of speed and agility. Each year, adult penguins share the responsibility of raising their chicks on the breathtaking offshore islands of this iconic coastline. This is a critical time for the African penguin as they face many challenges and life-threatening situations. Today, every breeding pair is rigorously protected from human disturbance. Yet, despite this, their numbers continue to decline, dangerously approaching a critically low level that could lead to extinction. Scientists suspect that the depletion of their primary food source, anchovies and sardines, may have a significant influence on their current situation. By using cutting-edge technological devices on breeding penguins, scientists provided the answers that may save one of South Africa's most charismatic coastal birds from extinction. To see the world's largest concentration of African penguins, we need to travel to Algoa Bay at the southern end of the African continent. This is one of the most pristine and spectacular bays in Africa. Fringing the bay are the largest undisturbed coastal dune fields found in the southern hemisphere. Massive volumes of fresh water seep under these sand dunes, and with the contribution from the rivers, generate highly productive coastal waters. Sardines and anchovies thrive here. And following these fish are two unique feathered species which crowd the offshore islands in spectacular numbers. This is Bird Island, home of the largest gannet colony on our planet. Every year, 200,000 Cape gannets flock to this island to breed. A little further along the bay is another biological treasure island. This is St. Croix, with the largest remaining colony of African penguins in the world. This island was the site of one of the first close encounters between European sailors and the African penguin in the 15th century. Today, Algoa Bay hosts more than 50% of the worldwide African penguin population, and both islands fall under the protection of the Addo Elephant National Park. Dawn breaks over the Algoa Islands. Cape gannets begin to fill the tranquil sky. Below, the penguin colony is quiet. At this time of the day, activity is kept to a minimum. Waking up is a slow, gentle process. for some of the more industrious residents, it's time to begin the daily chores. Among other things, this includes sourcing items from which they can reinforce their nests. With a robustly built beak, a penguin can slice through most plant matter found on the island. However, ambitions can sometimes outweigh capabilities. The loud call echoing across the island hints at another activity that might be taking place. For most penguins, the ritual of courtship marks the beginning of a durable, lifelong bond. Closely resembling a tightly choreographed skit, this dance incorporates meticulous mimicry and tender preening. It takes two to tango, the saying goes, and this performance is no exception. The pact is sealed with a song. This deep, reverberating bray explains the African penguin's former name, the jackass. This call is a means of recognition between partners, reinforcing their commitment to each other. The act of mating is an ungainly and clumsy procedure. An oddly shaped body with a lack of gripping limbs forces the male to do the deed while balancing precariously on top of the reclining female. Graceless as this may be, this act will provide the couple with eggs and the chance to raise young of their own in about 8 weeks' time. This will be the most trying time in the penguin's lifespan. Their breeding success depends entirely on their shared responsibility of finding enough food to meet the ever-increasing demands at the nest. As the morning unfolds, some decide that it's time to freshen up. Spending time in the nest leaves a penguin's coat dusty and often riddled with parasites. A quick splash in the shallow water soon remedies this. They reach the water's edge with great difficulty. But this clumsy comedy is soon contrasted by the sheer agility of the species once it dives under the waves. Several adaptations transformed this bird into a sleek underwater predator. Their bone density and structure is much heavier than that of flying birds, while their short, stiff wings are superb flippers, propelling the penguin through the water with astonishing efficiency. Unlike gannets, they must swim many kilometers to find food, and this job can take several hours. As the chicks grow, their demand for food increases daily. This means that adults must spend longer periods in the water searching for fish. Eventually, both parents must leave the nest on fishing expeditions to satisfy their hungry offspring. In these cases, lone chicks often group together into creches for protection and warmth. Here, they keep each other company. Returning from a successful fishing foray, these adults pick their way over the rocky terrain with a lot of difficulty. But these underwater adaptations came at a price. Their short legs and upright posture, which aid them greatly in swimming, are massive disabilities when on land, making them slow and clumsy. But that doesn't stop these tenacious creatures from delivering the contents of their noticeably bulging stomachs to their ever-hungry offspring. On arrival at their respective nests, the adults perform a recognition ritual consisting of gentle preening. The partner then moves off the nest and begins the process of cleaning itself, while the returning parent assumes its position on the nest. After cleaning, the departing bird immediately moves off in search of more fish. There's a constant flow of penguins coming in and moving out to sea to find more fish. The day wears on, and activity increases as partners continue to swap out and go to sea. When traveling to their feeding grounds, penguins like to move in groups. There's safety in numbers, as these penguins are a prize catch for any shark or Cape Fur seal. Being the expert divers that they are, these penguins have no trouble frolicking through some frightfully turbulent waters. It is hard to believe that these are the same creatures that are so awkward on land. the colony, patience is wearing thin. The chicks are getting hungry and finding it hard to keep quiet about it. Lucky for these young ones, food has arrived. Because each morsel of food is precious, the chick forces its bill down the adult's throat to prevent spillage. While everybody else is busy, the partner slips away to fish. The operation goes down without a hitch, and soon everybody's happy and well fed. Unfortunately, the same cannot be said for these penguins. If parents are not experienced fishers or do not correctly time the nest replacement, hungry beaks at home can become a handful. This female has nothing more to give to her chicks, and they are desperate for food. As the day progresses, the situation becomes unbearable. At last, her partner has returned. The greeting ceremony is kept to a minimum. The arriving male has no time to settle down, as the hungry assault is immediate. He has to provide both chicks with enough food and fast. Clearly a new parent, the male seems hesitant to feed his chicks. And this aggravates the situation as they become more and more desperate for food. He tires quickly of their begging and tries some physical discipline. Finally, he buckles. After much effort, the two chicks are rewarded with a small meal. These chicks compete for each and every morsel. It's likely that the smaller of the two will die before fledging. The evening sets in. In the colony, activity is still rife and will continue throughout the night. Using infrared cameras, we can observe the doings of these Bohemian islanders. Despite the peaceful scene, these penguins have a busy nocturnal life. A territory dispute between neighbors breaks out. But one party's not willing to risk injury over a spot of land. Even now, groups of fishermen are returning from their late-night raids. The rituals of swapping out the nest and feeding the young are performed throughout the night. Late at night, many breeding pairs stay together for just a few hours, reinforcing their special bond. For a short while, romance is once again in the air, and the whole family's reunited on the nest. During this time, their donkey-like calls fill the island. Until about 2 a.m., when the first crew of the day sets off to hunt for fish. Finally, a relative quiet falls across the colony, just as a new day begins. The fishermen have begun their intrepid daily quest for food. Here in Algoa Bay, this exercise leads the penguins over extraordinary distances with an average of 40 kilometers per day. These extended periods spent in the water expose the penguins to a variety of dangers as it takes them directly through seal and shark territory. Great white sharks patrol these teal-blue waters. The waters of Algoa Bay are renowned for high concentrations of young great whites, and they are very inquisitive. This steely predator is a master of the ambush attack. They charge their prey from below. While traversing these treacherous waters, penguins must dive to great depths to catch fish. They must return to the surface for air, which leaves them vulnerable to shark attacks. As another morning breaks, nesting birds await in anticipation for their partner to return, full of fish with which to feed their young. And, like clockwork, the triumphant hunters return. Unfortunately, not everybody arrives home safe and sound. Impaled on the teeth of a shark, this bird's injured and bleeding badly. Here, another fellow hunter has been bitten on the leg, probably by a seal. Despite its lacerations, the tenacious parent struggles through the pain to reach its nest. Upon arrival at its nest, there are no recognition calls for this penguin. Nor do its young badger it for food. The family unit immediately senses there's something wrong. These wounded birds will not survive their next trip out to sea. For these parents, the breeding season has come to an abrupt halt. The pressures of providing for the young are too much for one parent to bear alone. African penguins often fall victim to predators, but they too can be a force to be reckoned with. They are highly territorial birds and incredibly protective of their nests. Anybody who comes too close is in for a sharp reminder of this. On the edge of the penguin colony, many young Cape gannet fledglings are learning to fly. Unsure of their brand new wings, some learners find themselves in the middle of the wrong neighborhood. This young gannet has landed smack in the middle of the penguin colony. Confused and lost, it tries to find its way home through the penguin nests, with seething penguins snapping at its heels. These penguins will not leave their nests for fear of exposing their chicks or eggs. They do their best to make their animosity known. The gannet chick seems unfazed by all the discomfort it's causing. On the shores, however, reinforcements are returning from a fishing trip. Before swapping out with their partners, these returning hunters must deal with the outsider. In a panicked flurry, the gannet attempts to escape, but it's too slow for the three local homeowners who will see this vendetta through to the end. Two consecutive attacks on this helpless fledgling ensure that it won't be returning to its colony. This vicious, never-before-caught-on-film scenario has enlightened researchers to the extent penguins will go to protect their nests. The African penguin has many natural enemies. Some are more subtle than others. Here in Algoa Bay, the relentless and unforgiving sun beats down on the bird island inhabitants. Cape gannets have evolved to cope with this heat. The rapid movement in their neck helps them to keep cool despite being totally exposed. Penguins, on the other hand, have no such physical adaptations. Their thick coats are suited for the icy cold waters surrounding their island. This intense insulation can be a massive disadvantage on hot days like this one. Being stranded in this heat puts enormous stress on nesting birds and their chicks. The penguins desperately try to cool down, heaving and panting in an attempt to circulate air through their bodies. Parents try to cover their chicks from the sun, but for larger chicks, complete protection is impossible. The impact of a calm and hot day can clearly be seen when birds nesting in the open are compared to those nesting in a shaded spot. Some parents are so desperate to cool down that they abandon their nest and eggs and go to the sea. Even some of the strongest bonds forged in the act of courtship will buckle under the immense pressure of the elements. These birds will try again next year. It's not only the heat that can be lethal for chicks. A magnificent sunset announces the approach of a cold front. The following morning, conditions are cold and windy. The adults are nicely insulated and have no problems coping with this weather. Chicks, on the other hand, are not yet waterproof and must try to find shelter under the bodies of their parents. Many parents cannot fit both chicks under their bodies, and too often, only one survives. Exposed to the cold, many chicks will die of hypothermia before the cold front clears. Quite evidently, the African penguin does not fare well nesting in the open like they do here on Bird Island. These birds are adapted to living in burrows, where they are safely sheltered from the elements and aerial predators. Across the island are the remnants of a thriving industry that once was. Ghostly buildings, vacant and derelict, scar the island. These structures stand testament to the trade that saw the removal of the African penguin's nesting habitat on an unprecedented scale, and repeated on all the offshore islands off southern Africa. This is one of them, Mulgas Island, a small granite outcrop found along the west coast of South Africa. Just like Bird Island, it has a sizable colony of Cape gannets, which produces large piles of bird droppings or guano. It was for the harvesting of this smelly commodity that these buildings were built. It was the white gold rush. and to understand the full impact it had on the penguin population, we need to go back in time. It all began in South America in the early 1840s. Europeans observed that marine bird droppings could be used as a nutrient-rich fertilizer. This gave guano great commercial value, and the demand soared. It wasn't long before the trade came to African shores. Mining communities sprang up around the offshore islands of southern Africa. The accumulation of Cape Gannet droppings from tens of thousands of years was entirely removed in a matter of months. Mountains of guano were stripped off these islands, leaving just the bare rocks behind. The rush spread down the west coast of South Africa. Islands were divided into concessions and their guano caps systematically destroyed. The islands were scraped clean, leaving nothing behind. The deep, spongy guano layers that existed before the rush were the perfect nesting habitat for the African penguin. It was easily dug up by the penguins to create comfortable nesting burrows and protected them from the African heat and the winter rain. Today, the offshore islands are protected. All that remains of the industry are the mining houses and jetties. Unfortunately, this was only the first of many blows to the penguin population. Between 1900 and 1930, a staggering 13 million eggs were removed from one of the penguin's main breeding islands on the west coast of South Africa, Dussen Island. Egg collecting was finally banned in 1969, but by that time, the African penguin population had already taken a huge blow. Historical pictures taken on Dussen Island during the early 1900s give us a glimpse of what this colony was like in the past. Today, only a few pairs breed here. It's estimated that after the guano mining and egg harvesting, 95% of the original population of African penguin was decimated. But now, a new threat has reared its ugly head. Conservationists and scientists are worried that despite the protection of the African penguin and their breeding islands, the remaining population continues to fall alarmingly. In the last decade, their numbers dropped by 70%, and now the African penguin is classified as an endangered species. Lorraine Pitchgrew and her team are working here in Algoa Bay at the heart of the two largest remaining African penguin colonies to try and single out the reasons for this worrying decline.
Recently we have another threat where they can't find enough food. For some reason their food, sardines and anchovies, are in very low numbers, and which lead to a competition with the fishing industries that carry on fishing those two fish. And that leads to local competition because the gannets, when they breed, and the penguins have to come back every day to their colony to feed their chicks. So they're limited in the area where they can find their food. And gannets can fly up to 300 kilometers from their colony to find their fish, but penguins can't go further than 50 because they can't fly. So penguins are even more threatened than gannets.
Lorraine suspects that penguins are now competing for food with commercial fisheries. This is particularly critical for penguins when they are breeding, as they have a limited range to swim and dive to find enough food. there is good historical evidence that the impact of overfishing has affected the penguin population in the past along the west coast of South Africa and Namibia. In the years following World War II, the fisheries industry expanded dramatically. This resulted in a massive reduction of the African penguin's main source of food, anchovies. As reserves became depleted along South Africa's west coast, fisheries sent their vessels further south into Algoa Bay. By fishing near the breeding grounds, they are depleting the food of the African penguin by decreasing their chance of finding fish to feed their young. The only way to put this theory to the test is to use the penguins themselves.
So here we have St. Croix Island, and together with another island a little bit further in Algoa Bay, we've got here in this bay more than half of the global population of penguins. So today we're a group of several penguin scientists, but also we're working with fishery scientists at the government and also fishermen. And together we designed an experiment where we close some penguin colonies to fishing and some remain open to fishing. And you're trying to understand not only if food is a problem for penguins, but also how much fishing affects penguins' behavior and their population.
Researchers begin their studies by marking breeding pairs. They must then attempt to separate chicks from their parents so they can be measured. These measurements are very useful as chick size is a good indication of food supply. The chicks are then marked, their measurements recorded, and then they are returned safely to their nests. The disruption of the colony makes the researchers really unpopular with the locals, who snap aggressively at their heels and hands. It is also important to check the stomach content of the penguins. Researchers sift through the catch, making sure that the correct fish species are being consumed. This is an important indicator of food supply in the immediate area. The most important information is where they travel, for how long, and where they dive. This requires high-tech gadgets, but also some penguin wrestling. After several weeks of preparation, this is the big day. A cutting-edge technological device is attached to selected breeding penguins. The device records water temperature, depth, and geographical location while attached to the penguin. The bird goes on entirely unaffected by the new device. Although some do make a note of the new fashion accessory. After a few days, the device is removed and researchers can analyze the data. The device provides a clear picture of several foraging trips while the bird is breeding. This is one of them. It displays a complete foraging trip of 20 hours. The red line represents the position of the penguin with respect to the water surface. While the penguin is traveling to the feeding grounds or resting, it remains close to the surface. Once it reaches its destination, it starts diving to depths of up to 70 meters, searching for food. The water temperature is also recorded, and it is represented by the blue line. It clearly shows that penguins search for deep, colder waters where it is more likely to find anchovies. This information, combined with the continuous recording of the geographical position of the penguin, gives scientists a complete picture of the foraging effort of a breeding adult. A typical foraging trip will be a distance of no more than 20 kilometers from the island, and birds travel at night, diving just below the surface. As the morning breaks, they start searching for food to replenish their energies. They take several resting intervals between dives, and almost at the end of the trip, they hunt to fill their stomachs with fish for their chicks. While they are returning to the island, they are able to slow down digestion to have enough food for their chicks at the nest. The whole foraging trip will take around 20 hours. The combined data from many years and trips is providing something even more interesting. For the first time, there's clear proof that industrial fishing near the breeding colonies has a negative impact on the breeding success of the African penguin. The results are impressive. When commercial fishing is allowed near a breeding island, the penguins respond by increasing both their searching efforts and travel distance to find fish. Placed under this pressure, many parents fail to raise their chicks. Once the main breeding island is closed to commercial fishing, the situation improves drastically. Penguins' efforts are reduced, they travel shorter distances, and parents are able to raise their chicks to a fledgling stage. The conclusion is very simple. To prevent the extinction of the African penguin in the last stronghold in Africa, the commercial fisheries in Algoa Bay need to be managed responsibly. The same will apply to other colonies along the coast. Fishing near breeding colonies must stop. The unique geology, fauna, flora, history, and marine heritage of Algoa Bay is so outstanding that it deserves international recognition. By protecting such a unique bay, the African penguin will have a good chance to escape extinction and prosper once again. Humankind relentlessly exploited this charismatic bird in the past, and our impact can be attributed in great part to ignorance. Today, that is no longer the case. For effective conservation, the approach needs to go beyond individual birds. The entire ecosystem that supports this last delicate breeding population need to be protected. And to achieve that, it's paramount to protect the ecological integrity of Algoa Bay. These new findings give us the tools to reverse the damages of the past. An opportunity to respect and help one of the most beautiful marine birds on the African continent is staring us right in the face. It is up to us to ensure that these marine Charlie Chaplins continue to amuse and adorn our islands and coast.